Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our very first interview with teachers. So today I am here with two incredible teachers that I've worked with over my career and have known for quite a long time. We're not going to say how many years, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves and talk about their school that they work at and how long they've been a teacher. So who would like to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. Hi, my name is Lourdes Gutierrez, and I'm a preschool collaborative classroom teacher, also called a PCC teacher. I work at Victory Elementary School and at after-school program at Herrick Elementary School. And I've been a teacher for 24 years.
Hi everyone, I'm Angela Glucksman and I work at Nestle Avenue Elementary School, and I am the California State Preschool teacher there, also known as CSPP. I have been at Nestle for 14 years. Before I was at Nestle, I subbed for LAUSD in their early ed centers and state preschools. And before that, I worked at private preschools. So I've been working with preschoolers for about 17 years.
Thank you. So I know you've just shared what ages and grades you currently are teaching, but what grades or ages have you taught over your career?
Okay, I've taught preschool students ages 3 to 5, and that's it.
So before I got into preschool, I actually worked with middle schoolers. I was an education director, so I wasn't a classroom teacher, but I did work with them, and I worked with middle schoolers who had IEPs and helped put all of their services together. I also teach at Pierce Community College, so Los Angeles Pierce Community College. So I teach an intro to child development class. So I pretty much have taught preschool to, I think my oldest student was in her 80s. She took the class. She just wanted something to do at Pierce. So all ages.
Thank you. And Lourdes, you were saying earlier that you also work with special needs children.
Yes, I've been a special ed preschool teacher for the past 5 years. And that's been a great alternative. It's different, but it's nothing. I think it just sets different, different abilities to reach out to children with special needs. And I don't necessarily mean just children with special needs that have been identified, but just different strategies to reach out to any student that has any type of need.
Thank you.
Okay.
So why did you want to become a teacher? What was that inspiration?
You know, when I first started going to school, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I knew that I'm a first generation student going to, higher learning, and I became a paraprofessional, and I really liked what I was doing. The teacher that I had was a great mentor. I loved what she was doing. I loved seeing the strategies that she was using with students. I love to see the growth. I love to see the excitement in children. Just the ability to see how you teach something and children grasp it. The ability for them to want to explore even more. Being able to challenge them. Being able to provide for them in different areas. And I liked it, and I enjoyed, and I think every year I learn something different from every class that I have and every student they're in. Even families,
How about you, Angela?
I knew I always wanted to work with children. Even when I was a child, I knew I wanted to work with children, but I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and I'm pretty sure that was ingrained in me from my parents. When I got to college, I was on that pre-med path, and as soon as I got to organic chemistry, I said, this is not for me. I hated it. I hated the hard sciences, and I started taking some classes in psychology and education. And then meantime, I got a job working in an after-school program, and I just loved being with kids. And and that job turned into then working at the elementary school when I could during the day. And I just knew that's what I wanted. I wanted to be a teacher. I really enjoyed being with kids. And I like Lourdes said, I constantly am learning from them. And I fell in love with teaching. I was probably 18 at the time, 18, 19.
And you're only 22 now, so that.
Yeah, just a few years ago.
Just a few years ago. So how do you help children learn in your classrooms? What are some ways that you do that?
I think you have to begin with developmentally appropriate. Make sure it's appropriate for their age. You also have to be aware of their needs. Really know, now they're starting to do the blended learning, make sure that everything you have in the classroom, adapt it to everyone. So I think you have to know your children, make it appropriate, make it engaging, make it challenging as well. Not everyone is at the same level. So it really does have to be, there has to be a challenge. There has to be kind of take it from where the child is at. What do they already know? What do you need to teach them? Don't just teach them the colors, they already know, but go a little bit further. What happens when you blend colors? What new colors do you discover? Make it exciting, make it engaging.
Yeah, I agree with Lourdes. I think you have to watch the child, and every child is different. Every child is going to come in with a different skill set. And so you can make these beautiful lesson plans, and then you take them into the classroom, and you might find that your lesson doesn't work. So I think it's being flexible and just really sitting back and watching, what do the children, observing them, watching, what do they already know, what are they interested in, and how can I take those interests and help them and help it guide the learning. Because if kids are engaged and if they are interested, they're going to learn so much more than if you're just trying to shove curriculum down them.
Right. And I like what you said, to be flexible, because sometimes you have to improvise, right? And I know being in the California State Preschool teacher in the past, with 2 sessions, you may have an activity in the morning class and it's great, it's fabulous, and then you try it in the afternoon class and no one wants to do it, and you're like, okay, plan B.
Right.
So it's always having
flexibility.
Yes.
So you have classes back to back, and so you're teaching in the morning and teaching in the afternoon.
Yeah, deja vu every day.
Angela does. So I have
but
students.
It's actually not.
Oh no, I was saying I don't have 2 sessions, but rather just 1. So
yeah, and it's actually not deja vu, because like Lourdes said, that it really depends on the children. So, and the children are never the same.
Mm.
And so how do you
game every day? Sorry. It depends, right? Did they rest well? Did they eat well? So you
Yeah. Is it Monday? Is it Friday?
Right.
Before a holiday? Is it after a holiday?
Yeah. Believe it or not, it makes a difference.
Is it windy? So how do you support children's play experiences when they're in the classroom with you?
Lourdes, do you want to go, or do you want me to go?
Go ahead.
I try, and this is something that has changed as I have become, in the years that I've been teaching, I try to do everything through play. I mean, we know developmentally appropriate practice that children learn best through play. And if you can find a way to make a lesson fun for them and they think that they are just playing, they're going to take so much more away from that. I also try to set up my classroom so that play is our number one thing, and that the materials are set up for a purpose and a reason, and that when the child plays with them, then they are learning through play. So it has a lot to do with the environment set up, and it has a lot to do with listening to the children and seeing what they are into, and then sitting back and trying to figure out how to incorporate what the children are interested in and how I can make that fun for them, and so that they learn best through play. And a lot of times I'm learning even more is that if you sit back and watch, children will tell you what they want to do, and children will show you. So I think my only thing is I wish that that older children got to learn through play too, because in preschool, that's what we do. And I think that's why kids miss preschool so much. I have my kindergartners and first graders come back and say, I just want to be in your class. And it's because we play.
Yeah. I think you have to, even though it's play, it's like Angela said, there has to be a purpose. You know, there's an objective. And so you are making sure that you're meeting that objective through play and taking their lead also, you know, taking their lead, having the objective, challenging them also as you're going along, and make it fun and make it different. And don't be afraid to get dirty. You know, it's obviously not to make a mess, but, you know, let them explore, because as long as you're meeting the objective, but sometimes children will even teach you something, or you'll be surprised at the things that they know when they're playing, as opposed to, especially for those children that are not verbal. There's a lot of observation, you know, a lot of documentation that takes place through play. And I think that's very important, that you know, that they're enjoying what they're doing.
Well, and I loved how you were just saying that it's getting involved, but not taking over their play. And it's following that lead. And that's what I heard from both of you, is that that's such a critical part of play, is being involved, being okay to get dirty, but not take it over.
Yeah.
So
So
if the adult takes it over, it's not the children's play anymore.
Right.
It's just not.
So you want to have rules set up, but you don't want to have so many restrictions, you know, like don't put that there, you know, just be safe, but not limit them so much. Yeah.
so we're in the middle of the pandemic. So what was it like for you during the pandemic transition and throughout the rest of the school year? Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was? Because it took you out of these classroom settings that you've spent so much time being intentional in, and really trying to create an environment for children to learn to the best of their ability. And then you were put into an online format. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It was really hard. It was very challenging. The hardest part for me is that lack of daily interaction, physical interaction. I mean, my students, the majority of my students, we hug on the way in, we hug on the way out. And if I would have known March 13th that was the last hug I was going to give them, it was very hard. It was very hard transitioning, working from home. Having my own 2 kids at home was a super big challenge, because they were online and I was online. And I think just that lack of that interaction was hard. You know, I did Zooms with the preschoolers, and we really just focused on the social emotional part. I mean, we talked a lot, we shared things, we did a lot of singing, we did a lot of dancing, we did some art projects. But at the end of the day, my TAs and I always joked, it was so hard to hit the end button at the end of the Zoom, because it just wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. And honestly, I didn't, not to make it about me, but I didn't get that fulfillment that I get when I'm in the classroom. I felt really just drained, because I just didn't get that social, I didn't get to have that connection with them. I think the connection was missing. You know, we got into a routine. Kids got on the Zooms. We did, I also used Seesaw, so we did a lot of voice recording back and forth to each other. The kids and I would ask them a question, they would answer, and it was back and forth, but it just wasn't, it's not the same as being physically present with someone. The other hard part for me was I didn't get a chance. What I really missed was being with my students without their parents around. I think if you're a parent, you know that your children act one way at school, and they most likely act a different way at home. And so to watch some of these children interact with their parents at home and not get that moment with them without other adults, without parents being around, was really difficult, because I just felt like there was, it just wasn't the same as being in the classroom and being able to have those deeper connections.
I found it stressful as well. I think, you know, there were so many different platforms out there. You had Seesaw, you know, you had people talking about, Nearpod, or just so many of them. And just the fact to Zoom, it was like, oh, we have to Zoom. That I was totally new to that. And it was, sometimes I felt like, I felt like it was a disservice, like I'm not reaching out to students as well. You didn't have, we had children watching videos. We had some of the children having connectivity issues. So that was, that was a downfall for them. And you had parents that were saying, they're at home. This is a different setting for them. They don't want to sit there and watch, they don't want to watch that video of you reading. They don't want to Zoom with the teacher. They don't, even just doing some of the recipes for Play-Doh or some of the other sensory recipes that I was sending out, or counting activities, that wasn't what some of the students were doing at home. They wanted to sit there and watch their favorite shows and play with their own toys, and the interactions were not the same. So it was difficult. I think the positive side of it that I felt was that I was able to get a bit closer with the families through our phone conversations. I was able to get to know them a little bit better because there was more time for us to actually have a conversation versus the usual drop off and pick up. So that, I think that was a positive side.
Angela, can you think of a positive that you had out of the experience?
Well, one thing that I did that I really enjoyed, and I think I will continue to do, even when we're physically back in the classroom, is I would, once a week, I would read them a bedtime story. So we would do a special Zoom, 7:30. Everyone had to show up in their PJs if they wanted to, but they would show up in their PJs, they'd bring their stuffed animals, they'd be in their beds, and I would read them a bedtime story or two. And I just thought that that was I mean, my own kids were there, and it was just, again, like Lourdes said, it was just getting a chance to know them a little bit better. I mean, I never would have thought to have done that 6 months ago. I never would have even realized that I could. And I think that from a lot of my students' parents said that that was the part they enjoyed the most, was the bedtime stories. How often does a teacher get to read you a bedtime story? So I liked that part. They liked it. And, then we would do, in my classroom, I do a lot of mindfulness stuff. So after I read the story, we would do a little bit of deep breathing and, okay, what are we going to dream about tonight? And the parents were really amazed because they said those nights they go to bed, 8:15, where other nights they're chasing them around at 10 o'clock trying to get them in bed. So that, can you do it every night? I'm like, I don't think so, but once a week will work. So that was my favorite
that's
part.
very nice.
It sounds like that's a great opportunity for parents to learn more about some of the strategies that we use in the classrooms, or just ways that you can support parents more as a teacher. It sounds like you both found a way to open that door up a little bit more.
Definitely. I think another really positive part was exactly what you said, Rachel, is that people got to see a little bit of what we do, whether it was through videos, because I videotaped my morning circle, or live Zooms or anything. They even my own family, my parents would watch the YouTube videos and they were like, "You're so animated." Like, I'm like, but that's what a preschool teacher is. My friends were laughing because they would log on and watch the videos too. They're like, "We didn't know you had that side." I'm like, "Yeah, you don't know my teacher side. It's usually just for 3 to 5 year olds." So I think parents got to see that side, and we got to model for them a little bit. Like when I would read a story, I would read it how I'd read it in the classroom, which a lot of parents don't read that way. So I think that was definitely a positive part, is that they got to see how what their kids get to see every day.
Okay, so let's move on. So can you tell me about a time where you had to talk to a family about their child possibly needing an evaluation or getting outside services?
Lourdes, why don't you start?
Okay. Well, currently, my students already have services set up for them. But even then, sometimes, you still have parents that will come and ask, when will my child exit? Why is my child not receiving as many minutes as, my friends, or, but even so in the PCC classroom, we do have children in the general ed program. And sometimes in the EEC, the principal will put some of the children that perhaps were there the previous year with some challenging behaviors into the PCC classroom, knowing that, you know, I'm there. And what we do is we take a lot of data, you know, we take right observations down, we do the ABCs, you know, what happened before. I can't hear you.
Oh, what were the ABCs?
Oh, the antecedent behavioral consequence, you know, what happened before the behavior, and then what was the consequence, and then, you know, was there a change? What interventions did we do? So before we even, and this is the protocol the principal that I worked with wanted us to follow, before we talk to a parent, you know, it's like, well, what was the situation and what did you do differently? And if it wasn't until it was like after, you know, continuously writing the same information down, and if there wasn't a change, then she would approach the parent and let them know, you know, perhaps we'll, you know, have an SSPT, and then from there lead it to if they are qualify or not for services. But it is a very touchy subject. You know, no one wants to have someone come and say there's a possibility your child may need certain services. So you have to be extremely sensitive, very sensitive, and you can't identify them as, you know, as a teacher. You can't give them an, you know, an eligibility without knowing. That's not part of your, you know, job description. So you have to be very sensitive and make sure you don't say what there's a possibility your child may need, you know, specific services. You leave that up to the team.
Okay. And how about you, Angela?
So one of the things that I do, and I've done this now for about 5 years, and I feel like it makes a huge difference, is at the beginning of the year, I call it my rule of 4. Every day, starting the first day of school, I email or speak to, usually email because it's so, pick up and drop off was so quick when we were in the classroom, 4 parents, and I tell them something small that their child did that day that I just thought was amazing. And so I do that at the beginning of the year to build those relationships, so that when I do need to have those conversations, I already have an established relationship with them, and it's not like I'm just coming at them with this, well, your child has this problem and I think that they may. So because I as a parent myself, when the negativity is all you've gotten, you're just, it's already hard enough to hear it, but you're like, wait a minute, you know, and you see your child as a direct reflection of yourself. So if you can get some positive about it first, I really want to establish those relationships. And I'm not going to lie to you, sometimes it's a struggle with the kids who are our hardest kids, but I'll say, you know what? I asked him one time and he did it today, and I was amazed. I was blown away, and I'm just so proud of him. And so I try to create those relationships and give them some positives in the beginning of the year, so that when I do need to go talk to them, you know, maybe there's a possible problem, they're much more receptive then. I've had parents who are still not receptive. They, you know, again, your child is a direct reflection of yourself. So hearing that there could possibly be something wrong, especially because we're often the first to see it. You know, by the time they get to first or second or third grade, someone has already said something to them. But because we're the first, it can be very hard for them to hear it. So I'll invite them in. I'll say, you know what, as a parent, you have a right to come in and observe for 20 minutes. Just come watch. And that is, I would have to say, pretty eye-opening for most parents when they see their child and they see how their child behaves compared to how the other 23 children are behaving. That's pretty eye-opening. But still, I've had parents who come and do that and they don't agree. They don't think that there's a problem or an issue. And at that point, like Lourdes said, we are not diagnosing them. It's not my job. We're not able to. I mean, legally, we can't. So I almost think of it as planting the seed for them, because they'll hear it again next year and they'll hear it in first grade. And so if I plant that seed, but I have to say, most parents are pretty receptive. But there are always this few that just don't want to hear it, and you just kind of have to help them and plant that seed.
And Lourdes, do you ever find when you have families that you're working with, because you're in working with the population of children who are special needs, do you ever find that you have parents who have questions that may not have children in that program reaching out to you to just kind of check in and see, is my child on normal trajectory, or is my child possibly, do you ever get that kind of an experience?
You know, because I'm at the EEC most of the time, I don't even see the general ed parents. They get dropped off before and then they arrive after. So I have been included in the SSBT, which is when the principal, you know, and sometimes that's when, you know, we're introduced. And so sometimes they'll come. There are very few parents that I actually get to interact. I think in this school that I'm going to be starting will be different, because when all students will arrive and depart at the same time. So it'll be a different experience. Some of the parents don't even know that I'm in the classroom. They're not even aware that some of the children have needs. You would think that they would know, but the principal has made it that it's just, you know, there's no need to inform anyone unless they ask. That way no one's pinpointed.
And that's so important to make sure we're keeping the confidentiality of children.
Right.
For,
So, yes, I mean, sometimes some of the parents that would walk in, you know, like I had one student that was nonverbal, you know, and I'm carrying his like pet cards with me. And there are some children, like one or two occasions, you know, maybe they were there for another health impairment. And so it was obvious, you know, why they were there. But no one ever questioned it. Initially, the principal would have me go into other classrooms and observe students whose teachers, you know, had concerns, but she changed the protocol, which was just, you know, continue the ABCs, document, and then we'll meet, versus having me walk in and observe to see whether or not a child with possibility of having a need. Or occasionally when our speech pathologist comes in to serve our students, she may just ask her to stop by quickly in a classroom, or the OT or the PT, you know, the physical therapist or occupational therapist that comes in. We have an adapted PE teacher that meets with all students. So she includes a general ed. So there hasn't been that opportunity for me to really have another parent come and seek questions for any concerns.
And again, any of those visits into a classroom would not be official visits.
Right, they're not.
They're not part of an official process of evaluation.
No. Sometimes our principal would just go that route because you had some teachers who had concerns and it was like constant. So she would just be like, okay, let me just send this person in really quick. And most of the time there really wasn't a need.
Okay. So can you both share about an experience that you've had with a child who may have had some challenging behaviors and how you handled that in the classroom and with the family? And challenging behavior is not so much related to special needs, but just maybe they have something going on in their life and they're using their actions as a form of expressing what's going on, or just some sort of challenging behavior that is not something that you typically see across most children.
Student, the first one that comes to my mind was a little girl I had a while ago, and she had a lot of stuff going on at home. And so when she would come to school, she would bring all that stuff, just like everyone takes their stuff. And she would have some okay days, but most days she would, you know, she had a lot of behavioral issues. When we were eating lunch, we eat family style, she would crawl under the table and, you know, grab the other kid's legs, or she would refuse to come to circle time. And with her, I have to say, it really depends. Again, you have to observe the child and figure out what works for them. What works for one child is not necessarily going to work, and most likely not going to work for another child. With her, at first I tried to give her a lot of one-on-one attention, because that sometimes it's just attention-seeking behavior. They just want attention, and they don't care if they are getting negative attention or positive attention. They just want attention. That didn't work with her. I tried to make her my special helper. I tried to get her to do special things, and she didn't want to do that. And what I ended up figuring out with her, just through talking with her, with a lot of talking with her, was that she she didn't want to be controlled. And of course she couldn't verbalize that. She was 4 years old. At home, she was being controlled all the time. And most children don't want to be controlled. So I kind of had to take a step back and say, well, why am I making her sit down? Why does she have to sit down? Why can't she walk around? And I had to have a lot of conversations with the other kids. So and so, this is what she needs. You need something else, and that's okay. We're going to do. Excuse me. No, sorry. Working from home. So anyways, back to her. I had to really observe her and talk a lot with her to figure out what she needed. And I had a lot of meetings with her parents, and honestly, they weren't helpful because they didn't really know what she wanted. I don't think anyone had ever really listened to her. And so once they stopped trying to control her all the time and give her options, she eventually kind of came around and she stopped crawling under the table. I said, okay, if you don't want to sit in your chair, that's fine while we're eating. If you want to stand or you don't want to eat, that's fine. You don't need, but you can't touch the other kids. Like Lourdes said before, there has to be rules. But your rules, you need to think about why you have those rules. Why? She didn't want to wear an apron. She would get into a big argument when we were painting. One of the rules in our classroom was wear an apron. She didn't want to wear one. And I had to stop and think to myself, why am I making them wear aprons? What's the point? If it's going to be a battle, then they don't need to wear aprons. I tell their parents, don't put them in their Sunday best. When you bring them to preschool, they're going to get dirty. So that I thought really deeply and hard about what the things that she felt were controlling. What could I give up? And if it came to the safety of herself or the other children, I couldn't give those up. But if it was a rule that was just a rule, and guess what? Eventually her behavior started to get better. It took a long time. And I'm not saying she didn't have behaviors anymore. She definitely did. But I think she started to feel good that she wasn't being so controlled at school. So, but again, every child is different.
Right. So the situation that I had was that one meeting that we had with the general ed student, and we were taking documentation, and again, in the EEC, they get dropped off in like room 1, and then they'll transition to room 2. And then at the end of the day, they'll transition to room 3 because the teachers are leaving. And so there are a lot of transitions for children. So there was this one student who the gen ed teacher would say, well, it's so difficult when she gets here, which I wasn't a part of because I wasn't there. And I wasn't there when she would leave, but I was there during the day, that second transition. And she always said no to everything. Any transition, anything she wanted was always no. Sharing was always no. And she would throw herself on the floor, throw things, never wanted to share, and was just having these really like challenging times in the class. So we started taking documentation on her. We met with the families. Initially, the dad was quite upset about that because he said, there's something wrong with her. But after talking to them and telling them, every time, there's a transition or any time she wants to do something, no is often a response from her. We found out that she was the youngest at home, and that whenever she had to share and she didn't want to, either the mom or the dad would tell the other siblings, she's the baby of a family, so just let her have it. They were trying to avoid the scene, the typical, throwing a tantrum, which is what we were experiencing, because we were not telling the other kids, just it's fine, So we had to kind of like share with the family, what you're doing may work for you at home, but it's so difficult for her to understand in the classroom that, it's time for her to leave the other room and go into, room 2, or it's time for her to share, a spot in the water table. And she's not used to that. She hasn't built that. Why? Because she's, she doesn't have to experience that at home. So we were able to meet with the parents a few times after that. And they realized, our principal sat there with them also and explained to them, the different situations and how it was difficult for her. She was the one that was having a hard time. And that in order to help her continue, going on to kindergarten and sharing, which is social skills, they would need to put a bit of on their part at home and let her know that it wasn't always going to be her way. So again, we had some kind of like family intervention as a group. And we did start seeing some difference in behavior, but it was going to take a while because she doesn't know anything different other than I get my way at home. It's always been that way.
I love how both of you really work to try and find the root of what the cause of the problem was. As that's just so foundational in understanding what children are really trying to communicate. Um, so how do you support equity in your classrooms?
I have a poster in my classroom, and it's primarily for the adults that are in the classroom to see, but it also has a visual picture, and it says, fair doesn't mean that everyone gets the same thing. Fair means that everyone gets what they need. And it has that picture of the different size boxes and that they're trying to see over the fence. And we talk about that in our classroom from day one. Not everyone is going to get to sit on the squishy mat, because you can sit crisscross applesauce and you don't need the squishy mat. But guess what? George needs the squishy mat, so George is going to get the squishy mat today. That means that it doesn't mean that you won't ever get to sit on it. And so we talk about those things. We walk them through. We talk about how different kids learn differently, and that's okay. So if Alex is walking around the classroom during circle time, but he's listening, he's still learning, that doesn't mean that everybody gets up and walks around. You don't need to. And so at first it is hard for little kids to understand that, but then they get it. Because oftentimes what we're raised with and what we're told is fair. Everything has to be fair. Everything has to be equal. And that's not true in life. We in order to succeed, we all need different things. And so from day one, we talk about that.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's important that, that, like you said, the staff know that as well. And the fact that you have it up, even families that come into your classroom can see it. It's true. It's equality for everyone, but it's equity for that child that needs a specific thing. There's something specific. Sometimes we had a child that needed a specific transition, manipulative, a toy, something, and children knew, and they would go take it to that child. Yep. Here you go. We're going to go outdoors, or here you go. We're going with Miss So-and-so for adapted PE. They already knew. And occasionally you had that other child that, perhaps was having a difficult day. Perhaps they didn't sleep well, who knows what it was. And sometimes we'd go up to them and say, do you think you need that, that like the shaker? Do you think you need the shaker today so that we can go outside? And all of a sudden it was like, whoa, I have access to the shaker today. Yes, I need the shaker. And all of a sudden that child was, was fine. So I think they pick up on that. And they also know that certain children will need that shaker all the time, but it's also being able to giving access to those children that don't need it every day, but that, what, they need it today. So we're going to let them use it, and that creates like a positive environment in the classroom. You try to avoid as many challenges because, we're there for instruction. We're there to learn. We're there to cater to everyone with their different needs. And sometimes it's using whatever you have accessible. But the children pick up to it, and that's great because they know. We also use a lot of social stories. So sometimes we need a social story. And sometimes we'll just use a social story even for a child that doesn't need it. If it's a personalized social story for someone else, we'll just use their name, and it helps them. It helps them with transition, and it helps them with activities they're not wanting to participate in. And sometimes it just helps them be able to express what they need.
So it sounds like both of you really go in again. The underlying theme seems to be getting to know the children and their individual needs, and then responding individually and explaining to children why, not just assuming that all children will get it. But I also heard that from you, was that was critical.
Definitely. I was just going to say, I think that's one of my main concerns about starting distance learning with a new group of kids, because when we did distance learning in March, we already knew those kids. We knew what they needed. We knew them well. So getting to know this new batch of kids, come 2.5 weeks from now is going to be interesting. It's going to definitely be a challenge because establishing those relationships when they're at home with their families is going to look very differently than establishing those relationships at school.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. It's going to look different. It will be challenging because it's something that we're new to, but it's also something that we're, again, another learning experience. As teachers, we never stop learning. And so this will be something, something that we're going to have like plan A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, this didn't work. Let's try something else. And making it meaningful for them. Like this is a new way that we're going to get to know them, and somehow personalize it when you're directing that one child in particular, find out what they like, and make it engaging, make them want to show up to Zoom, make them want to look at that video that you pre-record, and reaching out to families, because I know that I had some families that at times just weren't understanding, like, what was the point of having them watch this video, and that smart start will be great for, I think, all of us.
And Smart Start is a term that is being used in LAUSD to...
We're going to take, hopefully those first 2 weeks we can do a Smart Start. And what that means is we're not teaching them curriculum. We are getting to know them. We're teaching families how to access the technology, getting the technology in their hands, hopefully, first of all, and just, really establishing those relationships and also setting up those expectations for what school at home looks like.
And it sounds like that's very similar to what you would be doing in the classroom anyways, minus the technology.
Right.
So what is one of your favorite teachers' secret go-tos that you have in your back pocket at all times, ready to go?
A song, a movement, a finger play,
Do you have a favorite?
If I have a favorite, I like to do this. It's like a movement that says I'm right now, I'm like, what is it? My body makes music, it's easy, you will see. My body makes music, it's easy, you will see. My head, no, I'm sorry, I'm confusing the song here. My mouth goes la la la. My hands go, you clap, clap, clap. My feet go. Oh, I think I got it all mixed up right now. But anyway, that's the, and then I do a Spanish version, and then we do like a nonsense version, na 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 na. My co-teacher knew a different language, so I was trying to pick up on that too, and we were trying to do 3 languages and then a nonsense one, and but we usually ask the children, which one do you want to do, but it's always just knowing a finger play, knowing and remembering the song, not like I just did, where I'm like, wait, I'm confused, what is it? I'm not in that classroom environment.
It's very similar for me, different, and it depends on the group. And even in my morning class and my afternoon class, we have different things that work. And also, if I'm trying to get them to listen, I'll change my tone of voice. I'll either be really silly or I have a secret. Who wants to know my secret? And they get all excited. They're like, "What's their secret?" It's really those types of things, and being silly. Oftentimes I'll be silly with them, and then okay, now I'm going to be serious. And I have a secret to tell you. And they all get really quiet. I'm like, oh, is everyone listening? And it just, kids, that's why I love working with them. If you did that with a group of adults, they would think you were insane. But a group of kids, that right there, that's what they love to do.
You had me captured and wanting to know what the secret was.
Well, that's why you're
No.
That's why I'm in early childhood.
Right. And you know what I think also helps? When your staff is silly like you, or goes along with it, or comes to class with their own songs, with their own, they're not just standing there. I think as a teacher, you have to include your staff and let them know what the expectations are as well, so that they know that if they're in a small group and they're having a challenging time, or they just need something to engage the children again, that they know at least a finger play or a song, or that they're doing some sort of an engagement, like even a tapping sound, like tap, 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 a pattern. And I think that that works well. Making sure that your staff is fully aware of what your expectations are.
So, knowing now what you know now, if you could go back in time to when you were a brand new teacher, what would be something that you would tell yourself then to make or to affect how you become the teacher who you are now? Or what would that one piece of wisdom be that you would share with that brand new teacher?
Only one piece, there's so much.
Or 4 or 20 or however many you want to share with us.
I think for me is it goes back to why do you want to think about why are you asking the children to do this? I think back to my teacher self 14 years ago, and I think to some of the things I had children doing, and I'm thinking, why was I having them do that? What was the reason that they were doing that? And did and so I think really think about what you want them to learn from it and why you're asking them to do those things. And it goes back to that example I've said, why do they have to wear an apron when they paint? Why? And most kids will and not battle over it. But when you have those certain kids who don't want to, conform to those things, why? Why? I think the other thing huge is being flexible, especially right now. Never had to be as flexible as I have in the past 5 months. The situation changes daily, so be flexible. And the other thing is, like Lourdes said this more than once, is that you learn as much from them as they learn from you, and never stop learning. I mean, I think every teacher I know has spent this summer on multiple Zooms every week, just participating in professional development and learning new things. I have spent most of my summer on social emotional ones because that's where my passion is, and I've learned so much just from other people, because different people, doesn't matter if they're children or adults, you're going to learn something from them.
Okay, I think for me, it's like, don't underestimate parents, really include them. And I know that myself, a few years ago, I would say, oh, what's the point? I already knew who I was going to reach out to with my letters, with any my back to school, open house, anything. My conferences, but you sometimes have those families that really struggle to create some sort of a bond or a relationship with the teacher. So I think you just can't give up on them. And I've learned that. There's different reasons, but when you really get to know the family and they establish, sometimes you can reach out to them a bit better. You have a better relationship. I mean, you're going to have their children, for a year, in some cases, CSVP home for 2 years. It's good to know where they're coming from. And it's also good for them to know your classroom rules, your expectations, that we do have a curriculum, and there's a reason why we teach what we teach. And I would also tell myself, learn a little bit more about challenging behaviors, document, don't assume, you know, um, those ABCs, those forms, just documenting, there's different forms of keeping um, control of like documenting for behavior, how often does it happen, but, and being able to know how to help a student de-escalate and how to help them express their emotions, which is very difficult. They don't know what they're feeling, and they don't know what to do to keep themselves from doing what it is that they're doing. So you just really need to be able to reach out. It's a lot of work because, we already have our curriculum, but then you also, in order, we don't, behavior doesn't drive instruction, but we have to be able to meet those needs, because otherwise instruction's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to reach out to those children, those families. So that's what I would just tell myself: reach out to families, be patient, flexible, and read a bit more about challenging behaviors and what to do.
So ladies, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for the time that you've given us today and the wisdom that you've shared with us. My heart appreciates everything that you've contributed to our world today. and everything that you've been doing for children and families for as long as that you've been making impact that you have been, and for our students. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
It's been fun. We're on a journey, new territory. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Oh wait.